in the heart of the Nebulan Royal Palace, where gravity bent gently beneath crystalline domes, and the air shimmered with the scent of moon blossom incense. Two warrior sisters stood like twin storms carved from ice and starlight. Their names were Lysara and Vayna, daughters of the High Matriarch of the Zenthari Dominion, blue-skinned goddesses with hair like frozen lightning cascading down their backs, each strand glowing faintly in the dim violet light of the twin suns setting beyond the palace spires. Towering and fierce, their armor was forged from living metal that shifted with their breath, pulsing like a heartbeat across their sculpted forms. They were legends across 3 galaxies, not for their beauty, though it was undeniable, but for the way entire fleets had shattered beneath their combined wrath. Yet tonight they weren't hunting warlords or crushing rebellions. Tonight, they had cornered a single human male in the grand hall of the palace, a man who had no business surviving this long. He was pressed against a towering obsidian pillar, his back flat against the cool stone, chest heaving, one arm bleeding from a gash that ran from elbow to wrist. His name was Rennick Vale, a soldier from Earth's outer rim colonies, a man who had once been a mechanic before the war took everything and remade him into something harder, something quieter. He wasn't tall by human standards, but he carried himself like a storm waiting to break. Coiled, alert, eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. His dark hair was matted with sweat and dust, his face lined with exhaustion and the kind of grief that never really leaves. He wore the scorched remnants of a combat suit, its insignia long since burned away, and in his hand he still gripped a plasma blade, its glow dimming like a dying star. He had fought his way through an entire guard rotation to reach this hall, not to escape, but to deliver a message, one he hadn't been able to speak before the sisters appeared like twin shadows from the palace's upper balconies. Lysara stepped forward first, her bare feet silent on the polished onyx floor, each step leaving a faint frost in her wake. Her eyes, pale silver like liquid mercury, locked onto Rennick with a mix of amusement and something deeper, something that made the air around them hum. "You've got the nerve of a comet, little flame," she said, her voice smooth and rich, like honey laced with thunder, storming the royal palace like a one-man rebellion. "Did you think we wouldn't notice? Did you think we wouldn't care?" Behind her, Vayna leaned against a floating archway, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. Her voice, when it came, was lower, rougher, like gravel wrapped in velvet. "He didn't come to fight, sister. Look at him. He's not here to conquer. He's here to plead." Rennick didn't flinch. He tightened his grip on the blade. "I didn't come to plead," he said, voice hoarse but steady. "I came to warn you. Your queen is going to die. And if you don't listen, your whole world burns with her." A silence fell, thick and sudden, like the moment before lightning strikes. The palace hummed around them, soft, melodic drones from the walls, the distant echo of ceremonial drums from the lower chambers. Lysara tilted her head, her white hair shifting like a curtain in slow wind. "And how," she said slowly, "does a dirt-born human know the fate of the Zenthari matriarch?" Rennick swallowed. Blood dripped from his wound onto the floor, sizzling slightly where it met the enchanted stone. "Because I was there," he said, "when the Shadow Covenant planted the sleeper agent in your royal guard. Because I watched him slip the poison into the Queen's chalice during the last eclipse feast. Because I stopped him once, but he'll try again. And next time, I won't be close enough to stop him." Vayna pushed off the archway, her frost-blue eyes narrowing. "You expect us to believe you broke into the most secure palace in the galaxy? To deliver a warning?" Rennick let out a dry, humorless laugh. "No, I expected to be dead by now. I just didn't expect you two to be the ones to kill me." Lysara stepped closer, close enough that Rennick could feel the cold radiating from her skin, could see the faint tracery of glowing veins beneath her blue flesh. She reached out, not with her hand, but with her mind, a gentle psychic nudge, probing his thoughts. He braced himself, clenching his jaw, refusing to look away. The sisters could crush his mind like glass if they wanted. But instead of force, Lysara found truth, flashes of memory. A dark corridor beneath the palace, a guard in royal livery slipping a vial into a golden cup, Rennick lunging from the shadows, knocking the cup aside, getting slashed across the arm for his trouble, then vanishing into the ventilation shafts before the alarm sounded. She pulled back, her expression unreadable. "You speak truth," she murmured. Vayna exhaled sharply. "Then why didn't you go to the Royal Inquisitors? Why come here like a thief in the night?" Rennick looked at her then, really looked. "Because the Inquisitors are compromised. Half your guard is loyal to the Shadow Covenant. I saw the markings on the agent's wrist, the black spiral. You know what that means? They did. The black spiral was the sigil of the Shadow Covenant, a fanatical sect that believed the Zenthari line had grown weak, that only through fire and blood could the Dominion be reborn. They had been hunted for centuries, driven underground, thought extinct. But they were back, and they were inside the palace. Lasara turned to her sister. We need to move. Now. Vayna nodded, already activating her wristband, sending a silent pulse through the palace network to lock down the royal chambers. But before she could finish, the lights flickered. The melodic hum died. The air turned heavy. From the shadows beyond the hall's towering arches, figures emerged silent, hooded, their eyes glowing faint red beneath their cowls. The Shadow Covenant had been watching. They had been waiting. The first bolt of dark energy screamed past Renek's head, shattering a crystal chandelier above. Lasara moved like lightning, shoving him aside as a second blast scorched the pillar where he'd stood. Vayna leapt into the air, her armor flaring to life, forming wings of shimmering energy that carried her toward the intruders. She fired twin plasma lances from her gauntlets, cutting 2 assassins in half before they could react. Lasara summoned her own weapon, a whip of pure frost that cracked like thunder, freezing one attacker solid mid-leap before shattering him with a flick of her wrist. Renek rolled to his feet, plasma blade reigniting with a hiss. He wasn't as fast, wasn't as strong, but he was smart. He ducked under a swipe from a curved dagger, drove his elbow into the attacker's throat, then slashed upward, severing the neural link in the assassin's suit. The man collapsed, twitching. The battle raged through the grand hall, a whirlwind of light and shadow, ice and fire. The sisters fought like a single being, their movements synchronized, their power overwhelming. But there were too many. Dozens poured in from hidden passages, some wielding ancient void blades, others cloaked in invisibility fields. Renek took a hit to the ribs, something sharp and cold that made his side go numb. He stumbled, gasping, but Lasara was there, catching him before he fell, her arm wrapping around his chest like a steel band. Stay on your feet, human, she growled, tossing a frost grenade into a cluster of attackers. It exploded in a wave of sub-zero energy, flash freezing 3 assassins into grotesque ice sculptures. You don't get to die yet. Not until you tell us everything. They fought their way toward the royal wing, a narrow corridor lined with ancestral statues that seemed to watch them with hollow eyes. Vayna took a blast to the shoulder, her armor cracking, her cry sharp and furious. She ripped the damaged plating off and kept moving, blood, silver and glowing, trickling down her arm. They're trying to reach the queen, she panted. This was a distraction. Renek nodded, clutching his side. That's what I was trying to stop. The real assassin isn't out here. He's already inside. The one who served the poison chalice. He's still in the guard rotation. He's close. Lasara's eyes flashed. Then we run. And they did. The 3 of them sprinted down the corridor, the sounds of battle fading behind them as the sisters sealed the hall with a pulse of energy, trapping the remaining assassins inside. The royal wing was quieter, more sacred walls lined with living tapestries that shifted with the viewer's thoughts, floors that pulsed softly with the heartbeat of the palace itself. But the air was wrong. Too still, too cold. At the end of the hall stood the entrance to the matriarch's chambers, a massive door of black diamond, sealed with a lock that responded only to royal blood. It was open, just a crack. Vayna drew her blade, a long, curved weapon that hummed with contained lightning. Lasara raised her frost whip, eyes scanning the shadows. Renek limped forward, his plasma blade held low. Wait, he whispered. If he's in there, he's expecting guards. Not you, not me. He won't expect us together. Lasara glanced at him, then at her sister. A silent understanding passed between them. They moved as one. Inside, the chamber was vast. A cathedral of glass and starlight, the ceiling open to the night sky, where the twin moons hung like silver eyes. The matriarch sat on her throne of woven light, frail but regal, her blue skin nearly translucent, her white hair braided with strands of living crystal. She was old, older than any human had the right to comprehend, but her presence filled the room like a storm barely contained. Standing beside her, hand resting on the hilt of his ceremonial sword, was Captain Drayle, commander of the Royal Guard. His eyes were calm, too calm, and on his wrist, barely visible beneath his sleeve, was the black spiral. Renek didn't hesitate. He's the one, he said, voice low but sharp. Lasara and Vena didn't need confirmation. They moved, but Drail was fast. In a blur, he drew his sword, a blade forged from collapsed star metal, and lunged not at the sisters, but at the queen. Rennick threw himself forward, tackling the captain mid-lunge. They crashed to the floor, the blade slicing the air where the matriarch's head had been. Drail snarled, kicking Rennick off, drawing a hidden dagger from his boot. Lasara cracked her frost whip across his back, freezing his arm in place. But he twisted, breaking the ice with a burst of dark energy. Vena dove in, her lightning blade clashing against his star metal sword in a shower of sparks. The fight was brutal, intimate. No room for grand moves, only survival. Rennick scrambled up, ribs screaming, and grabbed a fallen ceremonial staff from the floor. He swung it like a club, catching Drail in the side of the head. The captain staggered, but didn't fall. He turned on Rennick, eyes blazing with fanatical fire. "You don't understand," he spat. "The Dominion is rotting. The matriarch is weak. We must purge the old to make way for the new." Lasara stepped between them, her voice cold as the void. "You are not a purifier. You are a traitor." She raised her hand, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Frost crawled across the floor, up Drail's legs, his chest. He screamed as his body began to freeze from the outside in. But he wasn't done. With his last breath, he triggered a device on his belt. A pulse of dark energy that sent a shockwave through the chamber. The glass ceiling shattered. The throne cracked. The matriarch cried out as the energy wave hit her, sending her collapsing from her seat. Vena caught her, cradling the frail form in her arms. "Mother!" she cried. Lasara turned to Rennick, her face tight with fury and fear. "He's not dead yet." And she was right. Drail, half frozen, dragged himself toward the queen, his dagger still in hand. Rennick didn't think. He ran, straight at the traitor. He tackled him one last time, driving the dagger into the floor, then wrapped his hands around Drail's throat. The captain thrashed, his breath turning to ice, his eyes wide with rage and disbelief. You're just a human," he gasped. Rennick leaned in, blood dripping from his lip. "Yeah," he said, "and you're finished." With a final twist, Drail went still. The chamber fell silent, save for the wind howling through the broken ceiling. Rennick collapsed beside the body, gasping, his vision swimming. Lasara knelt beside him, pressing a glowing hand to his side. The pain lessened, just a little. "You're bleeding out," she said. "Why did you do it? You didn't have to save her." Rennick coughed, a weak smile touching his lips. "Because someone had to, and no one else was close enough." Vena approached, the matriarch in her arms. The queen's eyes fluttered open, weak but aware. She looked at Rennick, then at her daughters. "He speaks truth," she whispered. "He saved my life. He saved the bloodline." She reached out a trembling hand. "Bring him. He will not die tonight. Not in my palace." Lasara and Vena lifted Rennick together, one under each arm, carrying him like a fallen comrade. The matriarch was laid on a floating stretcher, already summoning her healers with a thought. As they moved through the palace, the sky began to lighten, the twin suns rising in a blaze of gold and violet. The battle was over, but the danger wasn't. The Shadow Covenant was still out there, and now they knew the human had foiled their plan. Rennick knew they'd come for him. He also knew he couldn't leave. Not yet. Days passed in a haze of pain and healing. The royal physicians used biogel and neural stimulators to repair his wounds, but it was Lasara's touch, the cold, calming energy of her hands, that helped him sleep without nightmares. Vena visited often, bringing news, teasing him about his dramatic entrance, and once, leaving a small ice-carved statue of a human soldier on his bedside table. "For luck," she said with a smirk. The matriarch recovered slowly, her strength returning in waves. She summoned Rennick to her private garden, a floating oasis of silver trees and singing flowers, where she sat beneath a canopy of glowing vines. "You are not like the others," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The humans we've known have come as traders, as diplomats, as conquerors. But you came alone. You risked everything for a queen you did not know, a people not your own." "Why?" Rennick sat across from her, still weak, but no longer afraid. "Because I've seen what happens when no one stands up," he said. "On my world, we had leaders who lied, soldiers who followed orders without question. And when the war came, it tore everything apart. I don't want to see that happen here." You're not just a queen. You're a mother, a leader. And if your people lose you, they lose more than a ruler. They lose their soul. The matriarch studied him for a long moment, then smiled, a rare, gentle thing. You will stay, she said, not a request, a decree. Not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as a guardian, a voice from beyond the stars. Rennek opened his mouth to protest, but she raised a hand. The Shadow Covenant will come again, and when they do, I will need those who see clearly, those who act without fear. You have proven yourself. He didn't answer right away. He thought of Earth, of the dust-covered colony where his sister still lived, of the grave marked with his parents' names. He thought of the silence that followed war. And then he thought of Lysara's steady gaze, of Vena's fierce loyalty, of the way the palace hummed like a living thing, welcoming him in ways he didn't expect. I'll stay, he said finally. But not because you ordered it. Because I choose to. The matriarch nodded, satisfied. Good. The sisters will train you. You will learn our ways, our weapons, our truths. As he left the garden, walking slowly through the glowing corridors, he found Lysara waiting for him. So, she said, arms crossed, one eyebrow arched. Ready to learn how to freeze a man's heart with a thought? Rennek groaned. Can I at least eat first? I'm still recovering. She laughed. Actually laughed. And the sound was like wind chimes in a summer storm. Fine. But tomorrow, no excuses. You're going to train. And you're going to suffer. He grinned. Looking forward to it. Weeks turned into months. Rennek trained under the sisters, learning to channel energy through his body, to move with the silent grace of a Zenthari warrior, to wield frost and lightning with growing skill. He wasn't as fast, wasn't as strong, but he was clever, adaptive, relentless. He learned their language, their history, their songs. He ate with the royal family, sparred with the guards, even taught a few of the younger warriors basic human combat tactics, especially the one he called the dirt in the eyes trick, which Vena declared dishonorable and then used to defeat her sister in a sparring match. But peace never lasted. One night, as Rennek stood on a balcony overlooking the city, the sky lit up with crimson flares, the emergency signal. The outer colonies were under attack. Not by pirates, not by rebels, by a massive fleet bearing the Black Spiral. The Shadow Covenant had returned, stronger, better armed, led by a figure in a void-black armor, his face hidden, his voice echoing across the comms in a language that made the palace stones vibrate. We are the fire that cleanses. We are the end of the old blood. Surrender the matriarch, or we will burn your world to ash. Rennek turned from the balcony, his heart pounding, his body already moving toward the armory. Lysara and Vena were already there, suiting up, their eyes blazing with fury and purpose. Looks like your training's about to get real, Vena said, tossing him a new plasma blade. This one forged with Zenthari alloy, humming with power. Lysara placed a hand on his shoulder. Stay close, fight smart, and don't you dare die on us, human. We're not done with you yet. He nodded, gripping the blade, feeling its energy pulse in time with his heartbeat. The palace alarms wailed. Ships launched from the orbital docks. The sky burned with the light of incoming fire. And Rennek Vale, the mechanic-turned warrior from the edge of nowhere, stepped into the storm once more. Not as an outsider, not as a fugitive, but as one of them. As family. The battle for the Zenthari Dominion had begun. And this time he wouldn't be fighting alone. The days that followed the crimson flares were long, silent, and thick with tension. The palace transformed into a war chamber. Maps of the galaxy glowed on the walls, fleets were repositioned in real time, and scouts returned with grim reports from the outer colonies. Entire settlements had been reduced to ash, their people vanished or worse, converted into mindless soldiers of the Shadow Covenant. The enemy wasn't just attacking, they were spreading, infecting, and their leader, the one known only as Vorith, spoke not of conquest, but of rebirth, of a galaxy purged of weakness, ruled by those willing to burn the old world to build the new. Rennek trained harder than ever. Dawn found him in the frost gardens with Lysara, learning to summon ice from the air, to freeze an opponent's breath before they could scream. By midday, he was sparring with Vena in the lightning ring, where every misstep sent a jolt of energy through his body, teaching him speed, precision, and how to fight through pain. He wasn't their equal, not yet, but he was no longer the wounded stranger they'd cornered in the grand hall. He was becoming something more, and with every bruise, every drop of sweat, every shared silence after a grueling session, The bond between them deepened in ways words couldn't capture. It wasn't just respect. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something quieter, warmer, woven from shared battles and unspoken understanding. Lasara, the eldest, began to watch him differently. Not just as a warrior under her tutelage, but as someone who carried a quiet strength she hadn't seen in centuries. He didn't boast. He didn't seek glory. When the younger warriors bragged about their kills, Rennek would just nod, clean his blade, and walk away. Once, after a brutal training match where he'd fought through a dislocated shoulder to win, she handed him a vial of healing gel and said, "You fight like someone who's already lost everything, but you still get up." He looked at her then, really looked, and whispered, "Because I found something worth fighting for." She didn't reply, but that night, she left a single moonbloom flower outside his chamber door, the Zenthari symbol of loyalty beyond blood. Vayna, fierce and quick to laugh, started teasing him less and watching him more. She'd catch him staring at the stars from the west balcony, his face shadowed with memories, and instead of making a joke, she'd sit beside him, shoulder to shoulder, saying nothing. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fire and violet, she surprised him by asking, "Do you ever miss your world?" He was quiet for a long time. "Every day," he said, "but I miss the people more than the place. And here, I don't feel as far from them." Vayna didn't smile. She just leaned her head against his shoulder for a moment, a gesture so uncharacteristically soft it made his breath catch. "Then you're not lost," she said. "You're just somewhere new." The sisters began including him in their private rituals, the ones only royal blood was meant to witness. They took him to the Hall of Echoes, where the voices of past warriors whispered in the wind, and taught him to listen, not with his ears, but with his soul. They brought him to the ice sanctum beneath the palace, where ancient Zenthari weapons were kept frozen in time, and let him touch the hilt of the Frostreaver, a blade that had not been drawn in 500 years. When his hand closed around it, the ice cracked, and a low hum filled the chamber. Lasara's eyes widened. Vayna let out a breathless laugh. "It recognized you," she said. "That's never happened to an outsider." Rennek didn't know what to say. He only knew that in that moment, he didn't feel like an outsider at all. Their bond wasn't without friction. One night, after a heated argument about battle strategy, Rennek insisting on a stealth approach while Vayna demanded a full frontal assault, Lasara stepped between them, her voice icy. "You fight like siblings," she said. "But without the trust." Rennek scoffed. "I'm not their brother." Vayna shot back. "No, you're something worse. You're the one who makes us argue." But later, as the palace slept, Vayna found him on the training grounds, running drills alone in the moonlight. She tossed him a water flask and sat on the edge of the platform. "I didn't mean it," she said. "You're not worse. You're different. You make us think. And that scares me." He sat beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. "Good," he said. "Means I'm doing my job." And then there was the night of the Blood Moon Festival, the sacred Zenthari celebration where warriors honored the fallen by lighting sky lanterns that carried their names into the stars. Rennek stood apart at first, unsure if he belonged. But Lasara appeared beside him holding 2 lanterns. "One for your parents," she said quietly. "One for the soldier you were." He took them with trembling hands. Vayna joined them, placing a 3rd lantern beside his. "And one," she said, "for the warrior you're becoming." Together, the 3 of them released the lanterns into the sky. As the glowing orbs rose, merging with the stars, Rennek felt something shift inside him, like a door opening in a house he didn't know he owned. The sisters began relying on him not just in battle, but in counsel. When the matriarch called her inner circle to plan the defense of the capital, Rennek stood between Lasara and Vayna, his voice steady as he outlined a plan to sabotage the Covenant's supply lines using stolen enemy codes. "It's risky," he admitted, "but if we move fast, we can cut off their reinforcements before they reach the 3rd moon." The matriarch studied him, then nodded. "Let it be done. And let the daughters of my blood, and the warrior who stands beside them, lead the strike." The mission was a success. Rennek, Lasara, and Vayna infiltrated a Shadow Covenant outpost on the ice moon of Krythos, moving like shadows through the frozen corridors. Rennek disabled the comms array with a trick he'd learned on Earth, overloading the core with a harmonic pulse from a salvage drone. Lasara froze the guards in place, her frost spreading through the ventilation system. Vayna took out the commander in a single silent strike, her lightning blade flashing like a storm in the dark. They escaped just as the base exploded behind them, the shock wave rippling across the icy surface. Back on the ship, as they soared through the void, Vayna clapped Rennek on the back so hard he nearly fell out of his seat. "Not bad for a dirt rat," she said, grinning. Lasara handed him a cup of warm star wine. "You fought like one of us," she said. "Today you earned your place." He looked at them, really looked, and saw not just warriors but sisters, protectors, family. And for the first time since Earth burned, he didn't feel alone. But the deeper the bond grew, the more complicated it became. There were moments, small, quiet ones, that carried weight. The way Lasara would brush a strand of hair from his forehead when he was feverish after a training injury. The way Vayna would challenge him to sparring matches just to see him smile when he won. The way they both watched him when they thought he wasn't looking, their eyes holding something they didn't have words for. One evening, after a long day of drills, Rennek sat by the palace pool, his feet in the glowing water, watching the bioluminescent fish dart beneath the surface. Lasara joined him, silent at first, then said, "You know, in our culture, warriors who fight side by side for a full cycle are considered bonded. Not by blood, not by law, but by fate." He turned to her. "And what does that mean?" She met his gaze, her silver eyes soft. "It means you're part of us. Forever. Whether you stay or go, you've changed us. And we've changed you." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was in the air between them. Vayna found them like that. Sitting close, not touching, but connected by something invisible. She didn't interrupt. She just sat on the other side of Rennek, leaning back on her hands, looking up at the stars. "You know," she said after a while, "when we first cornered you in the hall, I wanted to throw you into the prison pits." Rennek chuckled. "And now," she smirked, "now I'd throw anyone else in if they tried to take you away." Lasara shot her a look. "Vayna." "What?" she said, grinning. "I'm allowed to say it. You're too noble to." Lasara didn't deny it. She just looked at Rennek, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. Something tender, something afraid. The truth was the sisters were torn. Not by duty, not by war, but by heart. They had spent their lives fighting side by side, inseparable, their bond unbreakable. And now, this human, this stubborn, brave, infuriating human, had slipped between them like light through a crack. They didn't fight over him. They didn't argue. But the silence between them sometimes carried a new weight, a question unasked. And Rennek felt it too. He cared for them both deeply. Lasara, with her quiet strength and steady gaze, who saw the pain in him and didn't flinch. Vayna, with her fire and laughter, who challenged him at every turn and made him feel alive. He didn't understand the Zenthari ways of love. There were no marriages like on Earth, no formal unions. Bonds were formed in battle, in sacrifice, in the silent moments between heartbeats. And he realized, with a slow, dawning ache, that he was already bonded to them. Not by choice, by something deeper. Then came the vision. It happened during a meditation session in the Hall of Whispers. Rennek had been learning to open his mind to the Zenthari psychic network, a web of ancestral memory and foresight. That night, as he drifted into trance, the air turned cold, the walls pulsed, and he saw it, a future fractured and terrible. Lasara, standing alone on a battlefield, her armor cracked, her frost whip broken, screaming a name into the void. Vayna, falling from the sky, her wings of energy shattered, her body consumed by shadow, and him, kneeling between them, blood on his hands, unable to save either. He woke gasping, drenched in sweat. The sisters were at his side in seconds. "What did you see?" Lasara demanded, her voice tight. He told them. Both went pale. Vayna laughed, but it was hollow. "Prophecies are lies," she said. "We make our own fate." But Lasara was silent. She knew the hall didn't lie. It showed possibilities, warnings. From that night on, something shifted. The sisters trained with him more fiercely, as if trying to outrun the future. They stayed close, always within sight. And one evening, as they stood on the highest spire of the palace, watching the fleet prepare for the final assault on Voritha's stronghold, Vayna turned to him and said, "No matter what happens, you're not leaving us. Not ever." Lasara placed her hand over his, her touch cold but steady. "We fight together. We live together. And if the stars demand it, we die together." Rennek looked at them. These fierce, beautiful warriors who had taken him in, remade him, loved him in ways he was only beginning to understand. He didn't promise. He didn't swear an oath. He simply laced his fingers with theirs, human and alien, scarred hands and glowing blue skin, and held on. Because some bonds aren't made by words. They're made by fire, and they last beyond the end of worlds. Under the twin moons of Zenthra, when the sky shimmered with auroras and the palace glowed like a jewel in the night, Rennick Vale stood between Lysara and Vayna in the sacred grove, where ancient trees sang with the voices of ancestors. There was no Earth-style wedding, no grand ceremony as humans knew it. Only the Zenthari rite of eternal bond, where three souls weave their light into one. Their hands were joined, not with rings, but with threads of living frost and lightning, spun from the sisters' own energy, binding them in a circle of fire and ice. The matriarch blessed the union, her voice echoing through the grove, declaring them not husband and wives, but triad warriors of the new dawn. A bond unseen in centuries, where love and duty, battle and peace, were one. The people of the Dominion cheered, not just for royalty, but for the human who had proven that courage, loyalty, and heart knew no species. They did not live in the royal chambers after that night. Instead, they built a home on the edge of the floating cliffs, where the wind carried the scent of moon blossoms and the stars burned bright above the clouds. A place of quiet strength, with walls of living crystal and a roof open to the sky. Lysara brought peace with her stillness, tending the frost gardens where ice flowers bloomed in intricate patterns. Vayna filled the halls with laughter, sparring with local warriors and teaching children the art of lightning dance. Rennick repaired old Earth machines, built new ones, and created a communication bridge between Zenthra and the surviving colonies of humanity. He taught the Zenthari about music, rough, soulful songs from Earth's wastelands, and they taught him to sing in the harmonic tones of the stars. No grand battles came. The Shadow Covenant, broken after Vorith's defeat, scattered like ash in the wind. The galaxy breathed again. They rose together at dawn, trained not for war, but for harmony. Even their sparring was a dance now, frost and lightning swirling around a human who moved with grace born of pain and purpose. They dined under the stars, shared stories, argued over tactics for fun, and laughed until the sky turned gold. Lysara would rest her head on Rennick's shoulder while he read from ancient scrolls, her frost humming softly against his skin. Vayna would leap onto the table just to startle him, then kiss his cheek before vanishing in a flash of light. They adopted 2 orphan Zenthari children, twin girls with pale blue skin and curious eyes, who called Rennick father of stories and loved his Earth fairy tales. He taught them to build sandcastles with anti-grav tools and told them of dragons, while Lysara showed them how to grow ice roses, and Vayna let them ride on her lightning wings. Seasons passed, peace held. The bond between them deepened like roots in stone, unseen, unshakable. They walked the cliffs on quiet evenings, 3 figures against the sunset, hands entwined, hearts in sync. No titles mattered now, no wars called, only life, simple, rich, and true. And when travelers came from distant worlds, they spoke of the warrior sisters and the human who stood between them, not as conqueror, but as balance. They said love like theirs was rare, a fusion of fire, ice, and soul, that it proved no being was ever truly alone. That family was not born, it was forged, and sometimes it came from the stars, or from the dust of a forgotten world, and lasted beyond time,